Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Today's video is about stove safety, and it's specifically aimed at Duke of Edinburgh, scouts, young people involved in their first outdoor cooking session. DofE assessors, instructors, wild campers, there might be bits of information that you might find useful in this video. As a freelance mountain leader, I spend a lot of time going into schools, teaching a variety of subjects, and one of which is stoves and stove safety. And what I have found over the years is that lots of different schools use lots of different cooking systems. But it's fair to say that the most common cooking system is the trusted Trangia set. Before any students get any pots or pans out, I get them to have a good think about where on the campsite they are going to cook. We do not light a stove inside the tent. If you're using gas and it's cold, the contents of the gas canister can separate and you get a thing called a flare-up. You get a flare-up inside a tent, you risk setting your tent on fire. But then there's also the extra danger of carbon monoxide poisoning. So we light the stove a minimum of 2 metres away from the tent. And ideally we want to be downwind of the tent. We can use the tent as a little bit of a windshield as well. If we light the stove upwind of the tent, we risk a load of steam going in, causing additional condensation. You might have strong smells like fish and curry going into the tent and stinking your sleeping bags. And every now and then you might get a little blade of grass that might cause a spark, and that spark can land on the tent, cause a tiny hole, and then you've lost the waterproofness of your tent. So ideally 2 metres downwind of the tent. The next consideration is we do not want to be lighting the stove under trees. I once set a Duke of Edinburgh group up and went to get some water, came back and the teacher had moved them under some trees. So they carried on cooking under the trees, under my supervision. It was a little bit windy, they were getting all sorts of pollen, leaves and twigs dropping into the food, and they ended up binning the food, relocating to where I'd originally suggested, and then carried on cooking there. We're looking for a flat piece of ground, so a level surface, and ideally we want green grass. It's less likely to burn or set fire to the grass. Avoid long brown grass, there's a fire risk there. Some of the campsites may have picnic benches like this, and the temptation is to do all the cooking on the table. Resist that temptation, the stove should be on the floor. You can sit at the table and eat your dinner at the table, but any cooking needs to be on the ground. And the reason for that is if I'm boiling water here, and somebody knocks the table, there's a risk of that boiling water coming all over my lap. So you've got an increase of the chance of somebody getting burnt. The other rule I have around the campsite for young people is no bare feet. So they've just done a long walk and the temptation is to get the boots off because the feet are hurting. But I do not want them walking around the campsite in bare feet. A couple of reasons. If anybody does spill any hot water, they've got a chance of getting burnt feet. And the other danger is hidden tent pegs in the grass. Students running across the grass, they get a tent peg buried in the ground, goes between the toes, and it'll cut them down to the bone, and it's not worth even thinking about. So no bare feet around the campsite. Reduces the chance of burns, reduces the chance of injuries from hidden tent pegs. And then, once we've all agreed on a safe cooking site, then we'll get the pots and pans out. So we've got a nice flat surface here, green grass, so there's nothing going to catch fire. I'm downwind of the tent and I'm not on a table or a chair. So we need to start getting things prepared. So first thing we're going to do is get the Trangia set and remove the strap. You will not believe how many of these straps actually get lost. They just get discarded, trampled into the mud or lost. So as soon as we take this strap off the Trangia set, put it in our pocket so we know where it is. So Trangia sets comprises of a frying pan, you've got the handle or the gripper, little kettle, with a couple of pans, you've got the base unit and the windshield. So there's 3 lugs and 3 holes that we match up on them, and we put them together so then they're secure and we get that level. Next thing we need to do is get the gas burner. Sometimes these are separate, sometimes they can be stored inside the kettle. And again, secure the bag so it doesn't get blown away in the wind. And the burner goes in from the top. There's a hole at the side where the valve comes through, and that simply clicks on. So we want the gas canister as far away from the stove as possible. And we screw that on, we turn the gas canister. We do not turn the pipe, the valve and all the stove set. And whilst you're screwing the gas canister on, you may hear a little hissing and a leakage of gas. So we give it a couple of minutes before we light that, so that any gas that's in the area is dissolved or dissipated. We are not going to light this stove until we've got everything ready. The temptation is people just want to light it and get a pan on, and then they start messing around trying to find utensils, trying to find the water, trying to find the food. So we do not light it until we are ready to go. So today I'm going to cook some noodles. Some Nissin or some soba noodles. Love these, but they're only 200 calories. So these would be a snack, not a full evening meal. So make sure I've got utensils ready. So I've got my trusty old titanium spork. Get into the habit of using the gripper to lift any pans. You start picking your pans up with your hands, you risk being burnt. These could be hot. So always use the gripper to pick any pans up. It's a good habit to get into. So we've got everything prepared and we're ready to go. So we're ready to light the stove. Now we're going to do this at arm's length, and what we've got to remember here is, girls with long hair, tuck your hair down the back of your t-shirt or your jumper. There's a horrible video on YouTube of a young lady on Duke of Edinburgh lighting a stove and her hair catches fire, and that'll probably amount to hairspray on her hair. Highly flammable, so tuck your hair in. It doesn't necessarily have to be young ladies with long hair, young gents with long hair, tuck it in. We turn it on by using the valve. Here it's a plus and minus, so we turn it to plus and we light it at the same time. I like to be able to hear it so it's roaring. Using the gripper, put the pan on, and then the temptation is to put the frying pan on top, and it helps the water boil quicker. But if that's just been on the floor, there's a risk of grass, slugs, leaves on there. So I always just give it a quick wipe on the sleeve or my thigh before I pull that on, so there's nothing dirty dropping into that water. Once a stove is lit, we never leave it unattended. There's always somebody present. If you need to nip off to do something, you tell somebody. So using the gripper, I can remove that. We've got a little bit of heat of it now, so I'm going to add my noodles. And again, I'm careful that there's no rubbish blowing away in the wind. So we're going to leave these noodles soak up a little bit of that water before I add my sauce and my spices. I turn that down a bit. So it's just down to a simmer. This is the secret ingredient on these noodles. This is what makes them so nice. This sauce is delish. Then I add my herbs and spices, and I give that a good stir. So most of the liquid is gone now, so I'm at the point where I risk burning the contents of the pan. So I'm going to turn the heat off at the valve, keep stirring it so nothing sticks to the bottom. If this was a non-stick pan, I would not be using this metal spoon. So I'll double check that it's turned off, use the gripper to remove the pan. I'm not putting this into a bowl, I'm going to save on washing up. So I'm going to eat out of the pan. Oh my god, that is gorgeous. I'll turn the microphone off, I don't want you to hear me slurping. And another thing we can do, just to reduce the amount of litter, and I don't want any sauce leaking onto anything here, put that inside the bag, fold it up, put it in my pocket, ready to dispose of. Now to clean this dirty pot, all we need to do is put a little bit of water in the bottom of the pan, back on the stove, and then a quick wipe with a damp cloth. The pan's ready to be used again, no washing up required. So the key things there, once we've set the stove up, we have the gas canister as far away from the stove as possible. We don't light the stove until we're ready. We light the stove at arm's length. We hide any long hair tucked into a t-shirt. We never leave the stove unattended. If we do need to nip off to get some water or whatever, then we tell somebody that the stove is lit and they take over responsibility for the stove. We always use the gripper or the handle to lift any pots and pans, and if you are going to use the frying pan to put on top of the pan so it boils quicker, then just give it a quick wipe so we don't get any leaves or grass dropping into your water. When you're screwing the gas canister on, you might get a little bit of leakage, you might hear a little bit of a hiss. Don't light the stove immediately, just let that gas dissolve or dissipate. And we disassemble the stove once it's all cooled down. So gas is probably safer than the liquid fuel version, but there are still one or two schools that use the liquid fuel versions of the Trangias, so we need to know a bit about the safety on that as well. So we're going to cook some water for a coffee to wash our beautiful noodles down, but this time we're going to use a liquid fuel burner. So here we have our liquid burner. We've got the simmer lid or the simmer cap, and then the screw on lid. We're going to pour our meths or bioethanol into the burner, but away from where we're cooking. 3/4 full will probably last you about half an hour. We're only brewing up, so I'm going to fill it quarter, maybe a third full. And I'm doing this away from where we're cooking. So making sure I screw the top of my fuel bottle back up. And that goes into the middle like that. So there's two ways of lighting this. We can either try and light it direct, again, keeping any long hair out of the way. Light it from a distance at arm's length. Or you can dip a bit of a twig in and transfer the flame from the twig onto your fuel. In daylight, this flame can be difficult to see. So one way of checking it, we come from above, come down, and I can feel heat from it there. And I've just seen a little bit of a flame. So that is lit. One thing we never do is we never pour fuel directly into this burner here. We risk the flame travelling up the fuel and into the bottle. An easy way of measuring how much water I need. Fill my cup up. Using the gripper for the pan, transfer the water into the pan on the stove, and again wiping the frying pan, put that on and help it boil quicker. Again, I'm careful that I don't get any rubbish blowing away in the wind. So if this flame is burning too hot, you can use the simmer ring. So you can adjust this, that will turn it off. I plonk that on to put the flame out. Or if I want a lesser flame, I can turn it halfway and pop it on the burner. So we might end up using meths or bioethanol over gas. Gas will generally cook it quicker and it's safer, but in lower temperatures, gas might not always work. If your gas bottle's not working, it might just worth sticking it in your jumper, warm it up for a bit. There's a bit of steam coming from it. We even used the gripper to take the frying pan off. So that's boiling away nicely. Be careful where I put this. The water's boiling, and I put that into my cup. So the problem now is I've got a flame, can't turn it off at a valve, so I can either just let it burn out, or if it was still nearly full, just use my simmer cap, put that on top, and that will extinguish the flame. So we do not use the lid. The lid has got a rubber O-ring seal in it. If I was to put that onto the hot stove, I'm going to melt that rubber ring. And then once it's cool, we can remove the simmer cap, and then we can put the lid with the rubber ring in and screw it on. That still had a little bit of mess in it. We put the simmer cap back on, and because it's got a little bit of mess in it, I'm going to store it in the plastic bag in my rucksack. So if the rubber ring has leaked, I'm not getting mat all over the contents of my rucksack. So now we can put the kit back together. And we've got the strap because we put it somewhere safe. And as always, leave no trace. There you have it, a quick video on stove safety. So in summary, they don't get the pots and pans out until they've chosen a safe site to cook. And that's downwind of the tent, 2 metres, not under any trees. Don't boil the water on a table or a bench. You've got a risk of it being knocked over and burning somebody. And we do it on green grass and not brown grass where it could catch fire. For the gas cooker, we get it all set up. We don't light it until we're ready. We've got food, water, utensils all ready to go. We'll light it at arm's length. We keep any long hair tucked down the back of your t-shirt or whatever you're wearing. We never leave a stove unattended. If you do need to nip off, tell somebody the stove is lit and they take over responsibility for the stove. For the liquid fuel burner, we fill the burner away from the area that we're cooking. We can use the simmer cap to put the flame out. We do not use the lid with the O-ring in to put the flame out. We'll light it at arm's length, and again we're keeping any long hair tucked out of the way. So when we're using meths, the burner might be running low on fuel. We make sure the flame is extinguished and it's cooled down before we top it up. We never ever ever pour more fuel onto a lit burner or a burner that is hot, because it could ignite again, and the flame will travel up the fuel and into the bottle that you're filling it from. Other safety considerations: use long matches or a long lighter, which is what I've used today, and it prevents you getting your hands close to the flame. Generally, the food of choice on Duke of Edinburgh expeditions is pasta, which will require you to pour some hot water out onto the floor somewhere. Do it away from the area that you're cooking. If you pour it out right next to where you're cooking, your colleague comes and kneels down and sits down, potentially they're going to burn the knee or the bum. The likelihood is it'll cool down, and the worst case scenario is they get a wet knee or a wet bum. But get into a habit of pouring your drainage water from your pasta away from the area that you're cooking. If you do spill any pasta or rice on the floor, pick it up, put it in the bin, because it's just going to attract insects and animals snuffling around during the night. Get into the habit of using the gripper or the handle to pick up any pot or pan, whether you think it's hot or cold. Good habit to get into. Secure the strap somewhere safe when you're taking the strap off the Trangia set. These always get shut into the mud or lost, and you'll end up having to pay for a new strap. Also, if you're stirring pasta, hot food, soups, whatever in the pan, I've seen people using cheap plastic, and they take the fork out and it's basically a melted lump of plastic. Not good. So use metal or wood utensils. Another cause for potential injury is when you've boiled a pan of water and there's 2 or 3 people holding out the mugs with their sachets of hot chocolate or coffee in the bottom of it. And as you're pouring the water into the cups, there's a risk that you could spill it onto their hands that are holding the cup. So put the cups down on the floor, pour the water into the cups. There's no hands anywhere near it, so the likelihood of somebody getting burnt is vastly reduced. Just reiterate my number one rule around the campsites: no bare feet. There's a risk of them getting burnt from the contents of the stoves and the hidden tent pegs in the grass, people running around. It's potentially dangerous. And you just need to make sure that there's nobody messing around in the area that you're cooking in. And there you have it, a shortish video on stove safety, specifically aimed at the Duke of Edinburgh Bronze expeditions. If you've enjoyed it, don't forget to like and subscribe. If there's any other safety tips that you'd like to suggest, or you think I've done something wrong, or you do something different, put something in the comments below. And until next time, that's me signing off, and thanks for watching.